Welcome to Vendavo Commercial Excellence Month Live. Over the month of May, we're going to be having 4 weeks with 17 sessions and over 27 speakers. First, a couple of housekeeping items. Here's our obligatory disclaimer. Effectively, what we are talking about today is subject to change. And a little bit on Q&A capabilities. We will be doing Q&A at the end of the session. Do use the Q&A function there on the Zoom toolbar to put your questions in as you have them occur to you. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. If we're not able to get to your question, we will reach out to you afterwards with an answer. Finally, let's take a look at some upcoming events. Wednesday, we're very excited to introduce our latest solution. It's Vendavo Margin Bridge Analyzer. It's built to handle the enterprise complexity of price volume mix analysis with flexibility and simplicity. The session will include a discussion on the role of causality as a key capability in commercial excellence, and you'll see a live demo of the solution. And for existing Vendavo customers, pay particular attention. We'll be talking about a special promotion, a special offer for 6 months free trial with that new solution. On Thursday, Jordan Hahn will be joining me to discuss how configure price quote solutions can modernize your customer experience and control your pricing execution through flawless agility. And on Friday, we'll talk with key members of Vendavo's value consulting team, how Vendavo customers has been successful using value consulting to integrate technology, process, and people. Just last year, they delivered $500 million of benefits across 27 engagements. This is a discussion you won't want to miss. Now, folks have been asking for links to the sessions for on-demand view. Know that we'll be sending out emails with those links and recaps a few days after the sessions. And of course, you can check back on our website as we make those event links available there as well. The events run through the end of the month. You can use that scan code to register or head over to vendavo.com for the full agenda. But let's talk about this month-long virtual event before we turn to today's discussion. Last week, we had a panel discussion with Peter Regan, Louis Columbus, Stefan Liuzou. Bruno and Alex Hoff walked us through Vendavo performance and strategy and the product roadmap. We had Stefan and Bruno in a session to discuss pricing concepts for action in the C-suite. And we had a great discussion with a longtime Vendavo customer on their success on moving to the cloud. And we closed the week out with actions for pricing in disruptive environments with Stefan Liuzou. Across all these topics, we talked about how things are different. These sessions were originally set to be face-to-face in person as part of our ongoing program of building a community to drive commercial excellence. Just like you, we've had to pivot to continue to deliver value to our community in these turbulent times. And that community is the pricers, the sales leaders, the P&L owners that are responsible for sustainable profitability. There's a ton of internal challenges, a ton of externalities that have to be considered as we create optionality for growth and investment in the business. To frame our thinking in these times, we've developed and are using a 3-phase framework. Now, people are talking a lot about the shape of a curve, whether it's V-shaped or W-shaped or L. A lot of people now are talking about the swoosh shape, kind of the Nike drop and then slow recovery. That's important. The shape is important, but the stages of the shape are important because that's how we organize our perspectives, what's happening today, tomorrow, and the future. So the first phase is disruption. That's the unforeseen, and we're all dealing with those issues right now. Over time, that pace slows a bit, and you're repeating how you address those immediate issues with learnings. The things you did once or twice before, you're now doing more often. That's the sign of new normal. And now here's the difficult part. You need to look for the shift. And if it's the slow improvement trend of the swoosh, it's going to be harder to recognize when that shift begins for you and your organization because it's more than surviving a crisis. It's about being ready to thrive. Yes, you need to manage through that, but more importantly, you need to work to adapt yourself and your organization for what's on the other side of the new normal. And that's the transformation phase. That's the basis for thriving on the other side. And that's why we're working on commercial excellence. So for this month-long event, it boils down to this. We're all connecting in different ways. This event is now virtual, but the objectives are the same, and certainly with a greater sense of urgency. So let's get started. Today's session is session 7. We're in week 2, it's the 12th of May, and our title here today is Vendavo Customer Services. from implementation to outcomes. Joining me today are Megan MacLean and Pieter Knols. Megan has more than 25 years of industry experience delivering global enterprise solutions to Fortune 500 companies. Pieter is a global pricing senior program manager, part of the business operations at Medtronic. He's been with the company for 10 years, with 8 of those in the pricing area. His past focus at Medtronic was the leadership of Vendavo deployments internationally and driving their migration to the cloud. And today he's driving commercial enablement of existing and new pricing strategies. Pieter, Megan, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
thanks,
happy
Mitch.
to be here.
You bet.
Yeah.
So with that, Pieter, again, really glad to have you here. Would you, I know folks know Medtronic, would you give us a little bit of orientation, a little bit of background on the company, please?
Yeah, and then thanks, Mitch and Megan, for inviting us here today. I'm happy to be here. Although it's a virtual session, it's great to do it in this kind of setting. Yeah, so for those of you who joined the webcast here today and don't know Medtronic, let me give you a brief, let's say, history and background on the company. Medtronic was founded in 1949 by Earl Buchan, basically a company that started in the garage, like some of other American stories started. And Earl Buchan basically developed his first pacemaker, and from that, basically the company has grown into the sheer size and volume it is today. At that time, Earl Buchan had a very, let's say, good mission and vision on how he wanted to evolve the company, restore health, extend life. So he was really focused on the human part of the business. And as you see on the slide here, also today we have therapies for over 70 medical conditions, basically to help patients around the world, to get better and to benefit from the things that we offer. The company is basically, let's say, organized in 4 pillars. Based on different groups. You see them here, cardiovascular, that's obviously the business where it all started. Diabetes, for those who have type 1 or type 2 diabetes with the pumps. I think that probably you might have people in your family around you that might have this kind of a disease. And then the minimal invasive therapies group is something that we, let's say, have relatively recent. A couple of years ago, we acquired Covidien, and this business also has grown, especially now in the let's say the situation today with all the ventilator market being a hot item, business that's obviously very meaningful these days. And then lastly, the restorative therapies group about brain and pain stimulation. So in these cases, a lot of therapies that we offer to our customers. And that takes us actually a little bit back to the mission. As we as employees, and either in pricing or finance or even in supply chain, once a year we still organize every year a patient event where we actually invite people who have received one of our therapies and tell their story about how it improved their lives and how they can get back into their daily lives again. So although that we're relatively far sometimes away from the business and and all the strategic things that we do, it's nice to hear these stories and know what we're doing it for. So just a little bit background on Medtronic, and obviously we if you have questions, we can address them obviously later in the Q&A.
Terribly meaningful work. Thank you for that, Pieter. So Megan, over to you.
Yeah, and thanks for that introduction, Pieter. We'll hear from him again in a minute. But today we really want to discuss how Vendavo engages with our customers. And, we think of this in terms of commercial excellence and what that means for our customers, and also what it means for us. And, what we found in our many years of doing these deployments and engaging with customers, that it's more about, there's more to it than just the actual deployment. And so ultimately there are 3 things that, most of our customers really rely on us for, and we need to guarantee for customers. So the first is a successful delivery. You need to be on time, on budget. Years ago, there used to be a big focus on that, but today it's really just table stakes, and every customer expects it. The second is user adoption, and this is really important because in many cases, we have thousands of users that will use our system, and we can build and design a fantastic system, but at the end of the day, if users don't use it, then we're gonna fail. So we need to make sure we think of the users in the design, in the usability of the system, and that we bring them along with us during the deployment. And then, of course, the third and arguably a very important one is your return on investment. So we know our customers make an investment in putting systems and processes in place. And we're here to help make sure we track and measure that return on investment. And I'll speak more about how we do that in a minute. But the presentation today is really anchored around how we engage with you and how we achieve these three things for our customers. So realistically, not every road is a straight path, and not every customer is at the same stage here in their journey, or even at the same stage in terms of their maturity. And so as a result, Vendavo has recognized that, and we've developed what we call a maturity benchmark tool. And so we're able to come in and help and map customers against this tool, and against where you stand related to some of your peers in your industry. And then we're able to assess where to start and where you want to get to. And we do this in a very thoughtful way before we start a deployment. And so driving outcomes, Mitch, if you could advance, thanks. So driving outcomes is important. And it's what our customers want, and quite frankly, what our customers should demand from us. And we know that in order to make our customers successful, we really need to bring together, people, process, and technology. And that's really how we think about this. So we've helped customers save literally billions of dollars with this kind of proven approach. And we really think of it in terms of 3 steps. So during the assessment stage, we really map your current business processes against our benchmark tool that I just spoke about. And that way we're able to rank kind of where you relate relative to other industry leaders. And this will help us prioritize which areas to work on first. And we also have tools to develop a business case. Almost all our customers require a business case. And then we're also able to do things like data assessment and readiness to kind of decide how long the implementation will take. During deployment, which is stage 2 in this diagram, we use the business case as our guiding principle. So we really want to configure the tool to make sure we are delivering on the business case. So we want to configure the system to track and measure and make sure we're getting the right things turned on for you. And we really do the necessary work during deployment to make sure that happens. And then after go live, which is, stage 3, we don't, walk off the field again. We'll meet with you quarterly. We'll track and measure value. We'll remap what you've done against that benchmark tool. And it really is a journey, and we can see that from Medtronic being here today. Medtronic's been a customer for 10 years, and we've gone through the cycle several times with them. So if I take just a bit of a deep dive here into the assessment phase, this is when we ensure we understand your business challenges, as well as how the solution can address those challenges. And we want to be very deliberate and do this up front. We don't want to be discovering these things along the way. So we want to agree up front what challenges we're solving, how we're going to solve them. And that way we build the correct level of plan up front. We will also help you, as I said before, develop a business case, and we have a tool we use for this. And this will show what benefits you can expect from deploying Vendavo. And this is the same business case we'll use during deployment. So there's a constant link here. We use that same business case throughout. And most of our customers, as I said before, will need this business case and will take it forward even to get approval to the project. It's often a commitment made to your leadership team. And so we want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how we're going to deliver on that. And then, of course, we're also able to conduct at this stage a change management workshop so we can scope what effort we think will be needed. And I will just point out here that all our consultants are ADCAR certified. So ADCAR is a change management certification. Every single one of our consultants has gone through that certification. And we've invested a lot in this change management because in the change management training of our folks, because we believe it's such an essential part of what we do. And then, of course, you know, data is critical and pivotal. I often get asked about data and data readiness. And so we have a tool we can use during the assessment phase to really know where we stand on data.
Thanks for that, Megan. I've got a quick question here for Pieter. Pieter, Medtronic's a really big organization. In the assessment phase, did you look at that as a single BU or a subset of organization, or do you think it has to be done on the whole enterprise? How did that work at Medtronic?
Well, Mitch, what we did is actually we look at both. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this question. So what we did is we looked at the country. Depending on the complexity of the country, we decided, you know, which business unit either to go first. If you know, if you have complexities in the country, you can say, okay, let this group go first, and then once we complete that, you know, we will onboard the rest. But there were also some smaller countries where we had the opportunity to say, okay, we can just do this in one go, have the harmonized processes, you know, in one go to the country. So the efficiency and making sure that everybody is aware about the new, let's say, processes, you know, it just gives a lot less confusion to the organization. So it really depends on who you're working with and what kind of organization you have to go through.
That makes sense. Thanks for that insight, Pieter. Megan, let's go over to deployment.
Yeah, so you know, during deployment, our team doesn't show up with a blank slate, but we show up with a set of recommended best practices that are relevant to you and your industry. And we've built this, you know, this repository over many years. And using both the best practices and the business case, we jointly developed during the assessment phase, we will define and prioritize the requirements. Now, as I mentioned earlier, outcomes is a part of everything we do. And, you know, in today's age, our customers, you know, they really want to buy outcomes. They don't want to buy a tool. They don't want to buy an endless project. They want to buy outcomes. And so we know this is very important. So before we complete the deployment phase, we will deliver the first view of the value. And so we did that value the value or business case during the requirement stage. We will use that to configure the tool. We'll make sure that we take benchmark data to baseline where we stand. And then what we'll do is we'll use that. And before we leave and are done with the deployment, you know, our team thinks in terms of we're done once we've started to achieve that value. And so we won't leave that before we've delivered the value piece. Many projects, as I'm sure most of you are aware, really fail to address this. And unless you get people using the system right away, you know, you're not going to be successful. And maybe since we're lucky enough to have Pieter here today, Pieter, I've got a couple questions for you. The first one is maybe you can tell us about the international deployments and, you know, how you went about harmonizing across regions, especially in Europe. I know this is challenging.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Megan. So actually what we did is we basically did first an assessment of, before deploying, we just looked at the map and we say, okay, which countries are crucial, in this deployment to make it successful. And then based on those, let's say, crucial, critical countries, we basically gathered all the business requirements from them, and we consolidated more or less everything into one spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet at some point obviously get very big because you have a lot of requirements. But if you start asking the questions, and you start diving deeper, you see that a lot of the pricing models and the deployment models that people need ultimately boil down to a subset of the same. It's just a different, let's say, flavor of it. So we were able to basically consolidate, over 100 scenarios into approximately 35 pricing scenarios. And on those, technically, we focused then to harmonize our pricing models only around those, let's say, 35 cases.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, Peter. I know you guys did a really good job with that. And the second question I have for you here, Peter, is, you did a really good job of handling the change management, especially given that you were changing processes across every country in Europe. And you had a lot going on. How did you handle that change management and the rollout across that many countries?
Yeah, and it's a good question again, Megan. I mean, change management is, if you look in all these deployments, is always the biggest hurdle. What we did is we defined clear goals for our change management. First of all, we wanted to give clear ownership of, let's say, the pricing responsibility. We wanted to hand it back to pricing. Obviously a lot of other teams are involved, especially classic, where finance, has a big stake in a lot of these decisions. We really wanted to make sure that pricing again was at the forefront of, of doing our business. At the same time, we also wanted to make sure that we had a clear governance structure, that this governance structure is going to help us to drive, these benefits that we're looking for. And thirdly, we also wanted to get an overall process efficiency. So with these three goals, we had a very clear step plan where we defined as is situation, and we had a to be situation. We say, okay, how do we get from as is to be? And we started to map these differences. And immediately when you put those two charts next to each other, you immediately see and find gaps where you see either processes fail, or we have a HR issue, or you have a system issue that you need to address. And technically, step by step, we went through these differences and gaps, and we try to close them as good as we can. But then you get to the point where you need to start communicating. You need to start, engaging people. You need to get, we had many communication sessions from top-down leadership where we really say, okay, let's push it, really from the top, and let's make sure that everybody understands this is coming from the top, and it's really important. But at the same time, we also had a lot of hands-on session with the people on the floor who actually need to go and start doing the work. So we then ensured, as we had these people onboarding, this journey, that we had a strong ambassador in the country, a person who knew what we were going to change, a person who know how the to-be situation was going to be. And at some point, by having these clear goals, the ownership, the governance, but also the efficiency, if they start to believe in what your project needs to entail, only then you can get the crowd, over the fence. Because if they don't, if your ambassador doesn't believe in your project, the rest is very hard to follow. So that's a little bit how we basically approach this project and try to make it successful by getting everybody on board.
I love that concept, Peter. You're actually putting a face on the concept. You're giving someone that people trust to put into that ambassador role, and those folks are carrying that message forward. And it's somebody that really, walks the walk, talks the talk. Really impressive tactic there. Really impressive way to make that happen. Megan, I think you were going to take a step into a little bit more on the implementation methodology.
Yeah, I added just a couple thoughts here. I'm often asked about the implementation methodology and what methodology we use. So I was going to take just a minute to quickly explain the methodology, and the crux of it is, we do focus again on bringing together people, process, and technology, but we use an agile methodology, which we believe is very important because users need to look at the system and interact with it very early on, and give immediate feedback and see the changes. And often until, you can put things on paper, but until you see them in the system and realize, well, this doesn't work quite the way I expected, or I have to scroll too much, you need to see it in action. So for us, working with an agile methodology is key. And the other benefit is we're able to prioritize what gets done first. And we do reprioritize that backlog after every sprint. And so it really puts the business in control there. And the next slide just takes a bit of a deep dive explaining each of these steps. And so if you run from left to right, the first phase is project planning. It typically doesn't last more than a few weeks, but it is really important to prepare up front. So both of our project managers need to be aligned on, what meetings or workshops are we going to hold and when. Who needs to attend those? We need a framework that we're operating under. We come with a point of view on this, but we need to agree to, what consists, the consistency of the executive framework, what the escalation process is. For example, we'll walk you through the RACI matrix that we have. And so we come with a set of things we really need to reach agreement on at this point. And then, of course, you get into the launch phase of the project, and then during the deployment, which is the longest phase of the project, this is where we actually doing the configuration iteratively. Every 3 weeks you're able to see and touch the system, and then of course we reprioritize the backlog, and of course we would not go and put anything in production before we've tested it, and that includes performance testing, a full round of testing, and unit testing, of course. And then it's important that we don't leave after go live. So we will have a team around to support you if there's any bugs found, issues with the system, we fix those. We'll introduce you to support, but more importantly, as I discussed earlier, we want to make sure that we kind of loop back here in terms of the value, because that's really the measure of success here as to whether we failed. Have we delivered the outcome we kind of agreed on up front? And maybe this is just a good place, Pieter, to ask you. You've used this as agile methodology with Vendavo, actually many times. Can you just comment on how it's worked for you and maybe some of the benefits you've seen from this methodology?
Yeah, so I think in Medtronic, historically, Agile was not so much known, and maybe it was also a transition in the way the company started to work. So having, let's say, you already as a partner that started to drive some of these Agile methodology, just helped us to get more visibility inside the company as well for these kind of deployment models. What I see from our seat, let's say, when we have to deal with this, one of the advantages is, especially now, in the past we used to have a lot of time spent on this this project planning, making estimates, making sure that where are we heading. So there's a lot of time in this pre-planning phase, and at some point what we decided is let's loosen up a little bit on that pre-planning phase. Let's still have a clear goal on what we want. Let's change the estimates to maybe even higher level estimates, so a little bit less accurate, but by having that that pipeline of, let's say, changes that then is coming to us a little bit more flexible, a little bit more agile, technically also allowed us at some point in time to react to new business needs. So the moment that a new request was coming in, that we maybe had an audit issue for some country at some point in time, we say, okay, we need to have a block or a control in the system. How do we get it in? The main advantage was that this agile queue, you can just you can pick up an item from this list, you can drop it off, and you just put a new story in. And as long as you have development time, you're able to change and still deliver within your time frame. So let's say by having that flexibility really gave us a lot of advantage. And I think especially in these times where a lot of things are needed to be react quicker, be quicker, I think this really helps for us. I mean, so for me, I'm very happy with this model.
Great, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think it's worked well. Okay, so if we just jump on here to the last stage, which is really the realization. So once you live on the Vendavo solution, we're not going to walk away and leave you. We offer a set of things which we believe are very important to your ongoing journey. So firstly, education is kind of a passion of ours. We know you'll have new users joining at some point that need to be trained. And we also know that as users use the system, they're going to learn a lot more, and they're going to need refresher training, or they need to become familiar with new functionality or with other parts of the solution. So we really feel like we have a responsibility to raise the bar from a pricing knowledge perspective. And we actually have Vendavo University that offers classes both on products, feature function, but also really around best practices. And some of those are actually accredited with PPS. So we do offer a set of pretty extensive classes. We can also monitor the usage of the solution by various dimensions. And so we can help you understand how the system is being used, how much time the people are, folks or users are spending in the tool, and who's in the tool. And so we can help you slice and dice that data if you're interested. And as we continue to track and measure value, so we'll be out quarterly meeting with you. We'll do a workshop, run through kind of the value we think you've got from the tool and other areas we think you should be exploring. You can really start to see the value that you've realized from the system, and you can make any tweaks and changes. And we'll also reassess where you fall on the maturity benchmark. So you might want to take some more steps, or you might choose to stay where you are. And so let me just ask Peter a bit of a question here. So Peter, you've been with us on this journey for about 8 years. It's not like we get live and walk off the field. And we've really kind of helped you leverage the tool to make sure you've got value. Can you just talk briefly about how Medtronic used price variance mix, and how you worked with Vendavo to make sure that the product kind of met your business needs?
Well, actually, we started to use the PVM functionality in the profit analyzer when we started, which was good at the very beginning. But at some point, as you grow in your maturity as an organization, you get new needs. I mean, it's like you have something and you want to go to the next level, and I think we expressed also to you guys when we had the discussion and say, hey, how can we basically take this to the next level if we have our business units and the business units maybe operate slightly in a different way? What can we do to basically get more insight on each of these business units as they operate? And that's basically when we participated with you guys to on this journey in this PVM modeling, where we say, okay, let's have the discussion. Let's put on the table what we need and collaborate together on a product that would suit our needs in various ways. And I know that you also have been asking other customers about this. So I think having input from various stakeholders and customers definitely helps to shape new future and for your products as well, and helping us in reaching our goals of this extra level of detail.
Peter, I think that's a great example of the partnership of working together, of taking the long view, the price volume mix capability and the flexibility. Those are the discussions we've been having with you, with Medtronic, with other customers as well. And this is really the case behind the product that we announced just this month, that we have a webcast on tomorrow to do a demo on, that we call margin bridge analysis. And it's exactly what you're talking about in terms of we've had technology, we've had patented technology to be able to do this for a long time. And now we've got that capability to be able to be flexible, because you're absolutely right. Even in one organization, if you have 3 different BUs, there's going to be 3 different views in terms of how to build that causality chart. So these capabilities are really easy for a user to set up, really easy for your leadership team to be able to consume and get those actionable insights. And we'd love to point to that as an example of working with our customers to bring more capabilities to the market.
Yep.
So Megan, let's talk about results real quick here. I think you've got an example here, right?
Yeah, I do have an example. And let me just say firstly, Mitch, I hope what folks take away from this is that we do have a very programmatic and methodical approach to ensuring that you get value from Vendavo. It really starts during the assessment phase. This is an example of a recent deployment where the customer achieved 5.9 million in benefits. And we've been told that our approach to ensuring adoption drives value, it works, and it is unique in the marketplace, just our kind of laser focus on making sure that we deliver outcomes and results. If you move to the next slide, Mitch, you'll see here, this is honestly one of my favorite slides. It really showcases, a lot of Fortune 500 companies that I've seen, and we've implemented at a lot of these, and customers have really saved a lot in terms of value and added to their bottom line. But I thought, since we were lucky enough to have Pieter with us here today, representing Medtronic and a lot of the great work we've done over the last 10 plus years, I thought maybe we would just take a little bit of a deep dive and hear directly from him on, what he did, or what Medtronic did, and then, what results they saw during their journey.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's good, Megan, because indeed, if I look at the slide again, I suddenly realize, where we come from the very first day that we started to talk about this kind of an implementation. If you look at the map on the left, international is everything basically except US. So it's a pretty big region that we're talking about in terms of deployment. You see the numbers on the right, 13,000 plus users. So we still have, and actually it's still growing as we refine our deployment in some of the countries. It's definitely a journey. But what is really important, if you look back, it's a little bit on, why did we ever start this journey, right? Why did we go into this direction? And for us, initially, when we started to deploy Vendavo, it was initially we started with PA, Profit Analyzer, the one on the bottom. It really helped us to get insights in our metrics, into our pricing strategies. We got to know more about how we were pricing in different countries, and we were able to compare different pricing strategies from countries to countries and get a better understanding what we could do better in terms of changing that. And as we moved into Price Manager a year later, roughly, technically we immediately had the opportunity to immediately centrally set goals and targets and implement a central governance process. That's really what we did with Price Manager to ensure that you have a strong framework that backs your strategy and gives you guidance into when you go into your next phase of the project. Also in Price Manager, we were able to implement price floors, especially if you work in the medical industry. And there's a lot of different reimbursement schemes. There's a lot of complexity in terms of tendering. And there's a lot of variables that you need to take into your pricing decision. And all these elements you can put in your strategy and you can capture in one central way. And then when we deployed Deal Manager, we had that strong framework implemented, and we could start leveraging that tool and basically move away from an Excel-based or Word-based, let's say, pricing system. We all know that Excel probably is the best and most useful pricing system, if you can still manage it in one page. But as soon as if your company gets bigger, then Excel might not be the tool anymore to help you there. So having a system with pricing guidance, get your comparable data from other customers, get insight on approval, review your customer portfolio. You get so much more in terms of what you can offer to to your sales force and insights and information rather than just data. Was really helpful for us to start driving this journey. So yeah, actually there were a lot of things that Deal Manager also brought in terms of customer compliance. We all know that a lot of our customers, they everybody's good in making promises, but at the end of the day, you need to convert that promise into your revenue books, right? You need to make sure that you hit your targets and you also drive your business going forward. So having that visibility on what still needs to be consumed from the customer contracts also gave a lot of value for us to to at least not if the sales did a lot of job and hard work to get the sales done, now the time is at the end of the day, you want to make sure that also that converts into the benefits that you perceive to get out of it. So that was really also a driver for us in this journey.
Makes sense. Pieter, let's look at a couple of points on success that you talked about.
Yeah, so if you talk about success, I think one of the key drivers here is obviously that we were able with a strong team to really enforce this one instance. It sounds relatively simple, but looking at a global company with multiple business units and obviously sometimes within business units competing priorities, because the market sometimes is different, really helps us to make sure that if we have one instance, it basically means that you're looking at one source of data. It means that it's a lot easier to get access. You don't need to have multiple systems, multiple trainings, all these things that come with multiple platforms. Is definitely for us was a big benefit in terms of also the let's say maintainability. So once you bring some new feature or there was an upgrade of Vendavo, you don't need to have this issue from, okay, now it's only live in APAC and we now need to worry about when are we going to roll it out in EMEA or when is LATAM next. No, it's just there for everybody. That was in the long run, in the beginning it's difficult, but in the long run this was definitely a big benefit for us. If you now look a little bit back, especially when we acquired Covidian, the truth must be told that we had a system which was sized at the size of Medtronic. If you buy suddenly a company as big as yourself, you also need to start thinking about your strategies on your systems. You you cannot just double up whatever you have, overnight. You need to start thinking about that. And that's also where we learned, having this benefit of moving to the cloud was something for us important. If you have a company that's dependable on a global pricing system and real global pricing system, so it means that it's, you hardly have a day, a point in time in the day where the system is not being used. The moment I go to sleep, somebody else is using it. So you really rely on, the stability and the performance of that system. So hence a move to cloud was at that point in time also, good for us to think about that. If you think a little bit more in terms of business outcomes, if you really think, okay, driving value out of these things, we definitely, like Megan also, you mentioned, we had a business case. And we put in the business case, obviously, a lot of elements like, how can we avoid price erosion? How can we go into further, stimulate standardization, process optimization? And these were key drivers for us. In a company as big as Medtronic, you need to have that standardization, in order to be successful in your business. And tools like Vendavo offered us, like this price uplift feature, really helped us to avoid that price erosion. And to give you a little bit of example here is we actually had products like a standard version of the product and a more premium version of the product. And when your customers get bigger and your portfolio gets bigger, it's sometimes for individuals even hard to keep overview. Okay, who is at which price point at which time, a period in time. And as the market shifts up and down, it's like gasoline, your premium and your regular. There's always a difference between your premium and your regular. So we wanted to make sure that the premium products had a good price point over the regular products. And we had tools now within our pricing system to really steer that, to really guarantee that we could benefit from these let's say uplifts that you can generate. Further, what we had, and I think that's a huge benefit in terms of these new product launches, we have a much more controlled new product launch. Probably people on the call here today, having a new product launch into market, listens very carefully, especially if you go multi-market into multiple directions. You really need to have this robust governance framework in order to make sure that not on day one you technically lose all your R&D money because you have one smart sales rep who's just worried about not making his targets and say, okay, let me throw this one in the special offer. I'm sure that there is appetite for it. So we really tried to make sure that we had a good robust framework around it. And I think from my point, and this is really, I'm happy to see that, if the fact that we are much better able to execute our pricing strategy, and that, as a result of this, we have a huge increase in our efficiency and in our reduction of pricing, invoicing errors. I mean, that was also a huge benefit to us. And I think, as you go along in this journey, this is also very important, if especially if you need to look at cost and savings and efficiencies where you can get them. So yeah, I think overall it's a big list, but I think it's true what's written here.
So Pieter, these are great points for folks on the webcast right now. We'll have time at the end for questions, but real quick question for you, Pieter. Would you say your business case was positive?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we didn't embark it to this level. I mean, obviously we started, like I mentioned earlier, with 10 countries, and we gradually increased that list to the map that you've just seen. So, yeah, that business case was definitely positive, and we'll keep pushing the boundaries of let's say making sure that we get the most out of the system as we do today.
Sounds great, Peter. We're looking forward to that. Megan, let's talk about the Vendavo community a little bit.
Yeah, and so, we believe that being part of a community is very important, and that you can learn from others that have been down a similar path. And so we'll ensure that we connect you with your peers at other companies that have been through a similar journey. And, a simple example, Peter, I know, you've reached out to me before and said, look, we're thinking about doing optimization. Is there someone we can talk to who's been through it? And by the same token, I've reached out to you and said, look, you've just done a migration to the cloud. Would you mind speaking to some other customers that are about to embark on this journey? So we really try to keep our customers connected, because we do believe there's a lot to learn, not only within the same industries, but even across industries. We also host quarterly webcasts. We want to make sure that we keep everybody up to date on our roadmap and where we headed. We offer business forums very much like this one. We've had to do it remotely this year, but we offer this several times a year in multiple locations. And this really allows you to stay network with Vendavo, know what's coming in terms of our product roadmap, but maybe more importantly, it allows you to connect with other companies and ensure you stay up to date on the latest product and industry trends.
Well, Megan, as a great example of that, right now, this virtual event that we're having right now is an example of reaching out to the community, even though there are turbulent times going on. We had Bruno and Alex review performance and the roadmap, and we're working to make sure that we stay engaged and keep that community up and viable and working towards getting on the other side of this.
Exactly. And Peter, which of these kind of tools or forums have you found most helpful over the years?
Yeah, I must say, I mean, talking to other customers and see how they basically use, the tools and how they get their strategies executed is always, for me, a very important benchmark to see, okay, hey, can I learn something from somebody else? Sometimes, a good idea, to have it by yourself is difficult, but sometimes leveraging on somebody else his thoughts and might give you that extra push in a direction that can be very, very helpful. So yeah, definitely talking to let's say peers in the industry or outside in this community definitely helps. I also think the meetings we have, Megan, the quarterly meetings definitely give us also insights into things to come on what's on the roadmap, because I think a clear roadmap is crucial for your business in order to be successful. So I think roadmap and those two are for me the two most important items.
Great. So let's just move on quickly to the next slide here. I thought it would be important to just point out, as part of our engagement model, we about way more than just deployment. We really have a dedicated team. We've invested a lot in this team, and we want to make sure we engage with you in the right way. So if we start here on the left-hand side, the business consultants engage us during the assessment or the sales cycle, and they really assist with mapping your business processes against that maturity benchmark we spoke about. They'll help with best practices. And they will continue to be engaged through the deployment phase. They really have a vested interest in making sure that you're headed down the right path from a strategic perspective. We assign an account manager to every account, and they will continue to ensure that they understand your key initiatives. They'll work with you to set up regular business reviews and executive meetings. We also assign a value consultant, and we have an entire team focused on value consulting. It's really kind of Vendavo's North Star, if you will, is the way we think about it. But we want to make sure there is a value consultant assigned to every customer and certainly every project. And we really want to use that as our guiding principle during deployment and after deployment. Again, we want to make sure we track and measure and give you help in terms of how you get value from the solution. Of course, during deployment, you would have a team that really leads that deployment, and we spoke about that methodology earlier. We also have a customer experience manager. that will be in contact with a lot of the users on a regular basis, and the user community. We want to make sure we're monitoring their feedback. And really, the customer experience manager is able to assist with rapid escalation. And this could be a whole bunch of things. It could be a bug or something else that kind of pops up. And then, of course, you know, executive sponsorship here is key. We will sign an executive sponsor, so somebody from our senior leadership team, to your account. We will have steering committee meetings, and we will ask the same from you. And so again, and investments, and maybe Pieter, you can just comment, you know, this could look overwhelming to new customers. Can you comment on how this kind of set of resources has worked for you over the years?
No, I don't see it as very overwhelming, Megan. I think what is important here is that, you know, you have, depending on your ask, you have different people you can reach out to who are experts in those fields, and that just, you know, helps you quicker to get in the direction where you want to get moving. So I think for us, you know, it never felt like anything, you know, overwhelming. It's just, you know, if you need somebody on a certain end, you better get a specialist.
Makes sense. And Megan, let's take a look at the engagement blueprint.
Yeah, and so, you know, there's really kind of three key pillars here. A lot of people ask me how we engage and what the framework is, and this is really our framework for how we engage with you. So we've described the team, and we want to make sure we're doing regular reviews that focus on your progress, and of course that you're getting the ROI you're committed to. So if you go to the next slide there, Mitch, you can see we do regular business reviews on a quarterly basis to make sure we, you know, lay out what we're trying to achieve and we're on the same page. We'll of course meet at least annually to review our roadmap review with you, and we would like to see, you know, your roadmap, and we want to make sure that these two things align, and this is really your chance to kind of impact that. And then, of course, we conduct regular steering committee meetings or executive meetings, again, to make sure that both companies are aligned. And if you move on to the next kind of set of meetings, our product team, as I've said, they host quarterly web meetings to make sure that you know the latest features and products that are coming. And we're also happy to schedule these with customers individually, of course, as well. But we do encourage a lot of product feedback. And if we jump to just the last one here, Mitch, you know, our customer experience team, as I mentioned earlier, they will meet with you actually monthly and produce a service report that can show, you know, have you had any system downtime, for example? How are users using the system? We spoke about that earlier. So there's a monthly report that's generated for that. And then, of course, value consulting I spoke about will happen, you know, on an ongoing cadence. It's typically quarterly. We'll meet with you. And then, of course, we've already spoken about benchmarking and business user forums. And Mitch, if we map this all on just a single calendar to give you a view of how we engage, we really do believe that this is a unique differentiator for us. Again, you can see kind of how we engage, what the meetings are, and we will work with you, your account manager will, to decide which of these make sense for you and which you would attend. And some of those, like business forums and webcasts, you can opt in or opt out. And others like value and executive meetings, we will really kind of insist upon because we believe that they are very necessary. And maybe Pieter, just here you can comment on, again, you know, I feel like to a new customer, this might look a little overwhelming. We've done all of these at Medtronic, and some of them we actually do more frequently than this. How has this worked for you and the Medtronic team, Pieter?
Yeah, I think we'll really focus on, let's say, our business needs, and then those are the elements that we bring forward to you in, you know, let's say our quarterly roadmap reviews. You know, as we make adjustments to our strategy or, you know, new, you know, elements come up, you know, on the roadmap, you know, that's really useful, you know, in order to to have you on board and to share that with you guys to ensure that you can help us to reach our goals. I think for monthly service reviews, that's especially now with with the cloud being on board, that's also something relatively new to us. You go into a different level of conversation now that we had in the past, when we had service reviews. So yeah, I think having these check-in points can be beneficial to understand how your organization and how your, let's say, the service that you're buying, how it's evaluating and progressing and improving over time.
Yeah, thanks, Pieter. That's very helpful. And so, Mitch, to summarize, we know that there are kind of three things we have to guarantee for our customers, and those, of course, are successful implementations. We want to make sure that we drive user adoption, and of course that we deliver value. And we really want to ensure that we do those three things for our customers.
Thanks, Megan. That makes a ton of sense. Now, I am conscious of time. We're right a little past the hour, but I do want to take advantage of the fact that Pieter's here, that he's carved out time for us. So if you can hang on, we'll have a few questions for Pieter and Megan. If you can't, know that we'll have a recording for on-demand viewing later. So let's turn to some questions that are coming in. I'm looking them over, and I think this first one, Pieter, I will point at you. I'll paraphrase this a little bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned that Medtronic is moving to a centralized pricing system. Does that mean a centralized pricing function as well? I guess it's kind of an org design question there.
Yeah, and that's that's maybe the question is maybe not so easy to answer, but what we're doing actually today is Medtronic makes, especially in pricing, we have the Center of Excellence now being launched in 3 regions, in Latin America, in Europe, and in Asia, where we really try to centralize some of the pricing back office work to ensure that we offload some of that work from the countries. So there we definitely see, let's say, some sort of a centralization of services, in the back end of Medtronic. And if you then think about process efficiency, optimization, this really fits well as, if you have a global process and you have one system that you can serve, this is really how it, then ties all together.
Sure, it's a balance. As you said, what capabilities are well served centralized, what capabilities or decisions are better in a distributed function, and that kind of varies from business to business, region to region, I suppose, right?
Exactly, and then what you ideally want to do is you want to have the pricing decision made by the people who are good at it, but at the same time you want to have that admin work, which is some sort of, sometimes not always the easiest part of the work. You really want to centralize it as much as you can, to create efficiencies.
For those people who are good at that, to be able to be good at that, for sure.
Yes.
Megan, I think the same question to you from a perspective of other customers. What have you seen other customers do in terms of services that customers have used to decide to either centralize or decentralize?
Yeah, I've seen it a number of ways over the years, and I think the most popular is customers want to centralize the rules around pricing, but then decentralize the approval. So when you have the system in place, you're able to put some frameworks in place to say, look, these are the kind of rules we're trying to enforce, and then they leave the approvals, with the regions essentially.
Sure, makes sense. So kind of starting on the left-hand side of the waterfall, that's a little bit more centrally determined, and then latitude as you move further and further to the right for those local decisions. Makes sense. Looking over the questions again, Megan, this is for you. Pieter mentioned working together to explore new modules. Does that mean working together to explore new capabilities?
Yeah, it does, Mitch. And so, we've had, with most of our customers, we have a long relationship, and we really think of it as a partnership. So, after the initial deployment, we do meet, we review roadmaps, we talk about, what things we have coming up that that Medtronic might be interested in or where they could get value from. And I think it's always driven by a business need or challenge that Medtronic has had, and how we can help address them, that need or challenge. And in most cases, it's really driven by what we have available in our product suite. But in some cases, Medtronic's come to us and said, look, we're seeing some gaps here, or we have a business challenge. Can you help us solve it? So in some cases, they've really, driven us to improve our product as well. So it's worked both ways. And we meet pretty regularly, at least annually, to review both roadmaps, make sure we're on the same page and aligned.
Alignment is key on this, absolutely.
Yeah.
Pieter, this one is for you. It's similar to the one we had before, I think. You are a big company with a long, successful history of working with Vendavo at Medtronic. How many users do you have? I think you mentioned that already. Here's the follow-up of that. What roles do they have, and what functions do they report to? So kind of an org design question again, maybe a couple of examples.
Yeah, so I think if we look at internally, obviously we work a lot with the pricing teams locally. We mentioned the ambassador earlier, but in this deployment, we also had engagement with the actual sales force and the sales managers. Obviously, when rolling out these different models, we really engage with them, in defining the different selling models that we have, ensuring that what they wanted to offer to their customer was a capability at least that we offered, on the either at day one or as on the roadmap in some of the later upgrades that we did with Vendavo. And then obviously when we were engaged, there are some countries where we also engaged closely with the finance team, especially if you talk around rebates. So rebates itself was a big that story in Medtronic as well, because for rebates you really need your finance partner. A rebate agreement, it's an agreement that where at the end of the period you basically pay a premium to your customer, saying, okay, you did very well. You received your targets, but you need the history and the volumes, and you need the details of what has been purchased in order to calculate the correct rebate amount and to give them the credit rather than to give them the discount on day one. So we really had to engage with all those stakeholders to make sure that we could offer that capability as well in our journey, launching Vendavo.
Sure. So a lot of roles are being touched there: sales, finance. You don't want to forget folks that have a play in the pricing aspect, a play in the profitability aspect. Make sure that they're brought along as you make those changes.
Yeah, and then let's not forget our IT teams. Our famous SAP application that's running in the organization, which is obviously the foundation platform for everything we do with billing and invoicing. So yeah, definitely a lot of engagement there.
A lot of engagement, absolutely. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and Megan, this is pointed at you, absolutely appropriate for you. How have timelines changed in terms of expected deployments?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody wants things quicker and faster, and I think as the whole market has shifted over the last few years, Mitch, to being really, really focused on outcomes is what customers want now. I think, being more laser focused on where am I going to get value and what makes sense to get out there first. I think really we see customers breaking things down more, chunking it up to say, let's be very specific about what we get live. And let's make sure we get the value and then use that to justify moving forward. So I think we've seen timelines come down, but we've also, Mitch, we've really seen the scope be more, very more intentional in terms of driving value.
Absolutely. Laser focus, as you said.
Yeah.
Megan, thanks for that. Pieter, thanks for that. Thanks for both of you joining today. This has been very, very insightful. Thanks for a little extra time at the end of the hour to get a few more questions in there. Right now, I want to quickly just go over some upcoming events. so that folks know that there's some things coming. As I said, Wednesday, we're going to be introducing our latest solution, Vendavo Margin Bridge Analyzer, and that's the flexible causality that we talked about earlier with Peter. That session will include a discussion on the role of causality in terms of how that helps move commercial excellence along. You'll see a live demo of the solution, and for existing Vendavo customers, we'll have details on how you can take advantage of a 6-month free trial. On Thursday, Jordan Hahn will join me and we'll discuss configure price quote solutions, how that can really help modernize your customer experience and still be able to control your pricing execution. And on Friday, we'll have key members of Vendavo's value consulting team. They'll be talking about how Vendavo customers has been successful using value consulting to integrate the technology, process, and people, those topics that Megan was just mentioning. Just last year, the team delivered $500 million of benefits across 27 engagements. This is a discussion you do not want to miss. Again, links for the on-demand views of these sessions will be coming soon. They'll be coming out in emails, and do check back on our website for those links as we make them available there. Registration via that scan code, or just come to vendavo.com. So again, Peter, Megan, thanks again for joining today. For all of you on the webcast, thanks for joining us. Looking forward to having you join us again. And until I see you again, have a profitable day.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks much.